You're listening to episode 2 in our ADU series. So in this episode, Stacy and I underwrite a property with an ADU. So enjoy the episode and make sure you check out the website, Denver Investment Real Estate/ADU for all the resources. Enjoy the show. Hey Denver, Chris Lopez here, and this deal analysis is part of our ADU series that we're doing with Stacy Rozansky. Stacy, how are you?
I'm good, Chris. How are you?
Doing really good. Always love doing deal analyses. So this is a property that was recently on the MLS.
Yep.
It's in Cory-Merrill. We're going to go through and run a couple different types of deal analyses on there. Since with ADUs, there's some options. So we're going to go through that on this podcast today. The numbers and spreadsheets we'll talk about, and of course, they'll be in the show notes on the blog post as well. So Stacy, everyone loves deal analyses. Before we jump into it, give us the overview of this property.
Yeah, I was able to walk this property. It's a really great area. The main house is a 2-bedroom, 1-bath house. And then the ADU was detached on top of the garage. So it had a kind of a studio ADU above a 2-car garage.
And look at the photos here. I mean, I guess these are the main house that looks gorgeous. Looks like recently renovated.
Updated. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the ADU was a neat layout. It actually had a main floor kitchen, and you can see it has a garage door opening from the kitchen in that photo.
Oh, that's cool.
And then upstairs was the studio, living room, bedroom, and bathroom.
Oh, that is a cool layout.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, how many bedrooms in the main house? You know, bed, bath layout. Same for the ADU.
Yeah, main house was just 2-bed, 1-bath. It did have a basement that you could probably make into another bedroom at some point down the line. And ADU is just, like I said, studio space.
Okay. So basically kind of like a bungalow up front in the main house? So you said, okay.
Yep.
Because it's in Cory-Merrill. It's kind of like Cory-Merrill around the Wash Park border.
Yep, exactly.
Okay.
Near Wash Park.
So, I mean, you know, you guys know Denver, great area, great neighborhoods, and also a very hot spot for, you know, ADUs and things like that. All right. Anything else on the property that really stood out or potential wins or issues before we jump into deal analysis?
No, I just thought it was good location, really well kept property. So I thought it would be a good one to run an analysis on.
Okay. So we'll have some of those notes in the show notes, and we're going to switch over to the spreadsheet now. So we're just going to plug in a couple things into Joe's spreadsheet that he lets us use. And Stacy, before we start plugging the first one, you know, there's a half a dozen different ways we can analyze this. Kind of list off some of the ways you were thinking about it and explain to us why we're going to do the ones we're going to do.
Sure. Yeah, I like playing around with the different options you have for ADUs. So you can live in one unit and rent the other, either short, medium, or long-term. You can put a long-term renter in both units. You can put a long-term renter in one unit and a short-term renter in another. You can medium-term them both. The list goes on and on. So we're going to run it as when you first buy the property and you're going to live in the main house and short-term rent the ADU.
Okay. So we'll do a house hack, short-term rental on the ADU.
Mm-hmm. We have a lot of clients that's what they're looking to do right now. So I thought it would be good to analyze this one.
Yep. So we'll do this. And of course, this, you know, in the previous episode, we talked about building ADUs. We'll talk more about that. And there'll be 2 very distinct deal analyses. You know, one is buying a property with an existing ADU, such as this one. And then there's building. So we'll kind of go through the deal analyses on both. This one's focused on just buying an existing one because that's what the vast majority of clients do. It's simple. It's easy. It's got the financing, the building costs, all that stuff. So, I mean, this is definitely the more popular route to go. So it's a great one to talk about.
Yeah, I think it's great to talk about. You might see that it has a higher price tag, which is going to be common with an existing ADU, but that you can still make the numbers work.
Yep. All right. So this property, primary residence, start giving us some numbers to plug in the spreadsheet.
Yeah. So it's going to be 10% down. Upfront single paid. Purchase price is $720,000.
And let's talk about that real fast because that's, I'm assuming you're doing, is that a jumbo loan or is that bringing it down to the conventional
That's
threshold?
a jumbo loan.
Okay.
So that's why we have to do the 10%. Although we are seeing different products out there now, but typically you're going to have to at least do 10% on a jumbo.
Yeah. And just keep in mind, as we look at properties, especially ADU properties, it's not uncommon for them to be above the conforming loan limits.
Right.
Which in 2021, in Denver, that's about $596,000. So we're getting close to 2022. And that every year they update it. And with the real estate prices, I would expect a significant bump in there.
Yeah.
But just be mindful. We should talk about properties. Look at this. Financing comes into play. And we've done quite a few ADU properties with jumbo loans in this higher price limit. So just little asterisk there to keep in the back of your mind.
Yeah.
So 10% down jumbo. We're doing upfront mortgage payment. Purchase price $720. Rough acquisition cost.
I had 7,000 in there, so right around there.
7,000. And then what about in terms of just like repair cost? I mean, look pretty.
Yeah, it was pretty turnkey, so I would keep those at 0.
So seller credits. And then do you want to account for, because if we are going to short-term rental, the ADU, do we want to account for the furnishing and setup and the initial repair cost? Or do you want to do that elsewhere?
Yeah, let's put that in there.
Okay. I mean, what?
I think 5,000. It's a studio. You're not going to need much.
So $5,000. You can do it for way cheaper if you're a Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace hunter.
This is true.
Interest rate. So jumbo loans. I don't know interest rates on those currently. So
you can still under 3. So at 2.875.
Oh my gosh! Really?
Yeah.
It's amazing. All right, so now we're going to just put in monthly rental income on one unit. This will be for the ADU short-term rental because we're assuming that the client or the new owner is living in the main house. Front house.
So we ran a AirDNA report on this, and it came back with $135 for a nightly rate and 80% occupancy. So that brings it to $3,240.
Okay. And this is just
monthly.
And this is gross income, or is this with or without the cleaning fees?
That's without cleaning fees.
Okay.
Because cleaning fees are really just a pass through.
Yep. So that numbers will be charged separately, and we won't account for because that should just be a wash.
Yes.
Give or take a few bucks, right?
Exactly.
Okay. So this is gross rental income, not the cleaning fees, but will be what's really hitting the owner's pocket. Cleaning fees and that stuff, that's just, we're not going to account for it here because that's $1 in, $1 out.
Yeah.
So about $32.50 a month.
And then we can put the vacancy at 0 because we're already accounting for that in the monthly.
Yep, because you said 80% occupancy.
Yep.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
We'll just kind of leave annual rent depreciation at 3%. Not going to be a big deal there. Property management. I guess we'll self-manage.
I think so. While you're living in the next door. And
I would say for the vast majority of our clients when they do this scenario or something similar, I mean, 90% are probably self-managing. 10%, maybe a little bit more, are hiring a property manager to do it.
And I think for this type of product, you would probably do that kind of hybrid manager where maybe they're just taking on the client calls or something. So you could do 10% versus the 25% for the full management of it. So, but I would run it without property management.
Okay. No property management. Monthly maintenance for reserves. This is where I don't know how you do this, but I debate back and forth. So ADUs, you have 2 structures, so 2 roofs, 2 stuff like that. But Airbnb, higher rental income, and it's been interesting talking about Airbnb managers. They actually say it's lower maintenance on Airbnb properties because you have so many eyeballs in there. Be a lot more preventative. So I'm at a point in my underwriting where I don't know what to put for repairs and maintenance and situations like that is my point with this. I
agree with the manager. So I would drop it to 5% because, we are bringing in a higher rental income. So that should more than cover any, thing that comes up.
Okay. So that's 5% of the gross monthly rent. So 5% of that $3,200 and change is what we're putting away for just repairs and reserves on the property, not cleaning and supplies and materials for the Airbnb.
Right.
HOA.
No HOA.
No HOA. Taxes.
Taxes on this property are
I can look it up if you don't have
$3,163.
$3,163. What about insurance?
I put insurance at $2,000, just a little bit higher, 2 structures, like you said. So I think that should be pretty good.
An important note on here, just in general for underwriting for insurance. 2 things to always make sure your insurance agent knows is that, hey, this is an ADU property. And my recommendation is to really pay attention to the replacement value they give the ADUs. A lot of times, it's like $40,000 to replace ADU.
Right.
I'm like, great. who that does that, because you can't build one for $40,000. And also make sure they know you're going to short-term rental it so you can have the appropriate insurance coverage. So 2 things keep in mind when you actually do underwrite this and start building out a property. Utilities. So obviously you're not going to be charging utilities to the ADU client. That's just baked into the rental income.
Yep.
But then the house hacker owner client is paying utilities for themselves and their Airbnb guests.
Yeah.
What would you recommend on here?
I think I put it around like $900 for water and sewer. Just pretty small properties, so I don't think there'll be big water bills. Trash is included in
Because it's Denver.
property taxes. Electric, I would do $1,000.
For the whole year?
Yeah.
Is that including gas as well, or are you separating that out?
No, together. Sorry, gas and electric.
$1,000 a
Think
year?
that's too cheap.
Oh yeah.
All right.
Or maybe I'm really bad
1,500?
on my stuff. I think I've not run Airbnbs, but I know, like, I go in Airbnbs or I get a rental car. I crank up the AC if I need to.
Yeah, you're probably right. They're pretty small units. That's why I was
Okay.
thinking lower, but we can bump it up to $1,500 if
Okay.
we'll be conservative.
And we can play around with these numbers as
Yeah.
well.
Then we're going to want to put internet in there.
Yeah. So what, 800 for the year?
Yeah, I think that's good.
Internet. So we got internet, Excel, water sewer, trash as part of the property taxes, landscaping, snow removal. We'll just assume the owner occupant is handling that. All right. Any other additional expenses?
I mean, if we want to put like the cleaning supplies and replenishables in there, I would do maybe $600 for the year.
All right. So going over to the cash flow tab on here, we're about $95,000 all in. That's 10% plus closing cost and the $5,000-ish to furnish the Airbnb or the ADU for the Airbnb. We were underwriting on here about $11,000 in annual expenses, which leaves us about a $28,000 NOI or net operating income. But our mortgage debt is about $32,000 a year. So a negative cash flow of $4,000 a year. So how do you interpret that? I mean, I see negative cash flow.
Yeah, but you're living there.
That's right. So 4,200 divided by 12. How's your mental math, Stacey?
I was going to say, yeah, bring out
All
that
right. Let's see
calculator.
So 4,200 divided by 12 is about $350 a month. So in this scenario, for putting a roof over your head, buying a place, utilities, $350, $400 a month for a client to live, while they're proactively managing a property
Right.
on the back of their property, but $350, $400 a month to live while you're building equity.
Yeah,
That's
and
great.
it's not what's great about this is it's not a shared space. You have your own property to yourself. You're significantly reducing your mortgage. So pretty awesome.
Yeah, I agree. And this is where, it's important to keep in mind, because this is, especially the ADUs, we've seen some, some instances when we've helped clients buy some properties where, hey, they might be $800,000, $900,000, $1 million property. And sometimes they actually have better cash flow than the $600,000 property does,
Right.
based on location and quality and all that. So, a lot of times we look at traditional long-term rentals. It's a lot more tied to like price bands. Like, oh, this place is that expensive, it just doesn't work.
Right.
If you start doing an ADU, especially if you start incorporating like a short-term, medium-term rental, the price of the property becomes a lot less important because this comes on, hey, what's the rent coming in? And that's so dependent on location and quality of finishes. So if you are buying a property and you want to do something like this, don't be, just be more careful on weeding out properties based on price point, assuming you can afford it.
Right.
But the numbers themselves can still support, a $750,000 or $1 million property and actually give you a better cash flow than a $600,000 property. It's been really interesting to see that.
Right. I think that's an important point to not rule them out, because we really have to look at it in more detail.
Yeah. All right. So you can see here, even though we got a negative $4,000 in cash flow, still getting some appreciation, still getting some debt pay down, and you still depreciate some of the property. Of course, this spreadsheet's not built to handle nuanced modeling like this. So talk with your CPA, and we always do a bigger modeling in here as well. All right. So this is scenario one.
Yeah.
And this is great for our clients because they might spend, 1 to 3 years is pretty common.
Right.
If we get someone that's, a no matter to the T, they'll be out at, month 13. Some people stay there for a couple of years because it's a cool location, cool property, hang out for a few years, all that great stuff. But once they move out, that becomes the next thing of like, what can we do with this property? Because, ideally, we want it to keep generating income and hopefully be positive cash flow.
Right. So again, with any of these properties, you're going to want to check with your local jurisdiction, make sure you're following all the rules, all the zoning, all the rental laws. But for this instance, I think we should model what happens when they move out and they put in a long-term renter in the main house. You can do this in the city of Denver. The long-term renter would hold the short-term rental license for the ADU.
Say that again, because this is just an important nuance.
Yes. So there are a lot of restrictions around short-term rentals in the city of Denver. So be sure to check out. They have a whole page dedicated to it. But you can have a long-term renter hold a short-term rental license for your property if you have more than one unit on the property.
And we have clients, we know other investors. There's actually some companies where they facilitate that stuff.
Right.
So it's a legal way to do it,
right.
But you have to follow
do your
the
own
rules.
Due diligence. This is educational.
Yep. And it works today. And in the future, things can change.
It may change.
So I'm back on the spreadsheet.
Mm-hmm.
I changed the number of units from 1 to 2.
Okay.
We'll leave in that 3240
Yep.
For, the ADU income. And then the main house, what type of rental income are we thinking on there?
Yeah, I think for that area, for a long-term rental, you could get $2,200 for that unit.
And one thing as we talk about rents on here, it's not uncommon that, hey, if you have that, sometimes you give the main renter a little upside in the Airbnb income or lower their rent.
Exactly.
So, there might be some wiggle room on here on this rent. So might be, some stuff on there because you want to make sure it's a good win-win situation and that your main tenant is good with it and also doing his or her part of the job on there. So here's where it gets interesting to me. What do we want to do with the monthly reserves? Do we increase into long-term rental or do we keep it the same since, hey, we've basically almost doubled the rental income and 5% of $5,400 is a good chunk of money?
Yeah, I would keep it the same personally. Okay. It's not going to be totally perfect because they're two different types of rentals. So I think it's just a good, estimate.
Yep. And then in terms of utilities, and we've had clients do different things. Do landlords still pay utilities or have the main house put in the utilities? What would you recommend the situation? How would you underwrite it? I
think I would just keep everything the same for underwriting purposes. I think that's a good point in how you could, strike a deal with your tenant. If they're managing the Airbnb, maybe you give them, you include utilities or, there are just so many ways to look at it. But for kind of making this more apples to apples, I think we should leave everything the same.
Or you could say $2,200 plus $100 a month in utility bill back.
Yeah.
One thing I would do here because I know how people are. I referenced earlier, like if I'm moving on this property, I'm going to be more conscientious of what I'm doing with, my thermostat and things like that. So I'm going to bump up water a little bit, $200 a year, bump up Excel. Let's just go bump up to $2,000 from $1,500. Because generally speaking, if you're not paying the bill, you're not as conscientious of the resources you're using. We'll keep the internet and Airbnb supplies in there. Now, same thing, $95,000 all in. Now we're talking almost, oh my goodness, $20,000 a year in cash flow.
Yeah.
So who cares about $500 more utilities then, right? So $20,000 in cash flow, which puts that about a 20% cash on cash return and a 7.2% cap rate.
Mm-hmm.
So when you see numbers like this, in my mind, amazing cash flow, and talk about a great part of town to own real estate in, and it's going to hold its value and probably just keep appreciating and always be a very desirable place to live. Damn, that's great.
Yeah. So this lets me think, let's go back one more time and put property management in.
Ooh.
Because if we're bringing in that much cash flow, maybe we can spend the money to make it more passive. Again, it will be not perfect. So let's put 15% in because you have the Airbnb and the long-term. So we're going to be somewhere in the middle there with, it's more expensive for an Airbnb property manager. So we'll just average it out.
All right. So that'll be 15% of the property management. And that income at 15% out of that monthly income, about $5,400 is what's calculating. So now that drops the cash flow by about $9,000 to $10,000 to $10,000 annual in cash flow. So, just under $1,000 a month. And at that point, like, I know which route I would go. I'd go this route and be hands-off property management.
Yeah.
But that's me.
Right.
What would you do?
It's a great question. I would probably go the same as you. I would think I would go with the hands-off route and see how it goes for a year or so. And if I felt like I could take it on, maybe drop it. But I mean, for these numbers, then you have the option.
Yep. And that's the nice thing about this is you got the flexibility on there. And again, there's no right or wrong. Keep in mind, Stacey and I, we have families and both have young children. Right. Time is a lot more precious now than it was 5 years ago and a lot more limited. So that, property management depends on the investor's level of interest, their skill set, and just, hey, what is that extra $10,000? Is it worth it to them? Great. Then self-manage. If it's not, great. Hire a property manager. Like, there's no right or wrong. It's what fits best for your portfolio and how you value your time in taking care of properties for cash flow.
Exactly.
Right now, I don't want a second job, so I would hire a property manager. 10 years ago, I would probably do it myself.
Right.
Any other scenarios? I know we could run a lot.
Yeah, we could keep running. I mean, I think if we wanted to, we could just flip to long-term, see what it does for two long terms.
And I think this is a great thing to do because if just Airbnb laws change
right.
or something, and just, hey, long-term rental underwriting is always like, hey, that is the plan B or maybe plan C. Like, hey, that's kind of like, I don't want to say worst case scenario, but I guess it is a worst case scenario. And this is just what would have happened.
Yeah.
So we got a studio out back.
So I would put that at $1,450.
$1,450. And then for that, we can drop the property management. Should we say the 10%?
Yeah, sure. And let's put a little vacancy in there.
Vacancy, we'll just say 3%.
Yeah.
And then, internet, probably get rid of that, right?
Yep.
Airbnb
Internet.
supplies we'll get rid of.
Yep. I think utilities as well.
We'll get rid of those?
Yeah.
Assuming we just build them back to the 10.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to delete the utilities from underwriting. In reality, it would be like we'd have the utilities and charge an extra $100 per unit to offset them.
Yeah.
But for simplicity, we'll just delete them. Monthly reserves, keep it at 5%?
Let's bump it up.
8?
Yeah.
All right. I like that.
Let's see
What's your guess?
I think it's
positive or negative cash flow?
I think it's be positive still.
I think it'll be negative.
Ooh.
Negative $2,800.
Okay.
So negative $220, $240 a month.
Mm-hmm.
So again, as a kind of worst case scenario on there, for having a $750,000 asset, as like a plan B, I would be happy to take that.
Mm-hmm.
But again, that's something that every individual investor has to determine.
Yeah, I would be too, because again, you've got $4,300 in property management fees. So I think there's room there where you could either get a better deal. Maybe you can get it at 7% or,
just get rid of it.
Cut it out completely. And then you're back
I feel like, hey, it has to be cash flow positive.
Then you're back to positive. So
you're at over $100 a month in cash flow then.
Yeah.
And this is where it gets fun underwriting properties. There's almost always a way to like pull a lever, do something to make it work.
Right.
Again, no wrong answer. Hey, $100 a month either way, I don't think is a big deal.
Right.
But other people, if they have a negative cash flowing property by $1, it sends them to the red zone. They can't have it. Fine.
Right.
Do what you have to do to make sure it works.
Right. And then that's why there's like 4 more ways we could analyze this as to figure out where it's going to meet the goals for the investor and also, just make the numbers work.
Yeah. So this was great. We'll be doing more deal analysis in the future. And maybe a little spotlight to not so much of the ADUs, but you're currently exploring doing some Airbnb on one of your properties.
Yep.
So we'll dive into that in the future deal analysis, since that, somewhat merges onto here. And you have how many property managers you've talked to for Airbnb the last 3 months or 3 weeks?
Around 5.
Yeah. So she's been doing her homework and due diligence, and we're going to extract it from your brain and see what you do. Cool. What else?
I think that's it. I love the flexibility of these properties and how you can kind of play to your needs at the point in your life that you are and make it work.
All right. Listeners, people here in Denver, if you guys have questions, reach out to me and Stacy. We help you find or buy or sell a property. Stacy can do some consulting as well on ADU stuff. If you want to use a spreadsheet, go to the website, download our free toolkit. You can download it. And we do a subscription to Air DNA, which is the most popular rental estimator for Airbnb. We're always happy to run reports for people, help them figure out. So we get a lot of resources on here, help you figure out what the right investment is for you, and also do some strategy, play devil's advocate, and underwrite it 6 different ways and figure out the best one for you.
Yeah. And reach out if you have done this on a property of your own. We'd love to hear your story.
So Stacy, great job. We'll see you next episode.
Sounds good.
Bye, everyone.